I was sitting in this wide classroom on the second floor of the seminary where I was studying to be a pastor. There were 4 long rows that stretched from the left side of this rectangle room to the right. And there were lots of windows behind us, so there's plenty of daylight in this classroom. Dr. Cecil Sherman, our legendary pastor of this very large church at the time, was our professor. He sat in the front, of course, and faced us. He had left church leadership behind to spend his final years teaching the next generation. I was the next generation back then. The class was called Life and Work of the Pastor. And I sat on the front row because I sat on the front row in every class. I tried to glean all that I could learn and all the wisdom that I could gain. That's why I sat in the front. I didn't get to seminary in the conventional way. I was older than most of the people around me. And importantly, my undergraduate degree was not in something like biblical or religious studies like many of the other people in the class. I had studied business. And then I discovered my calling in ministry. And so I was already a bit of an outlier. So Dr. Sherman on this day was trying to prepare us for what he knew would come to any church leader. And he was pushing us to wrestle with very practical, rapidly changing realities in the world. He was giving us real-life case studies that dealt with hot-button topics that are strangely, even 28 years later, still hot-button topics, like abortion and sexual ethic and LGBTQ issues. And so, now we didn't have that acronym back then, but the issues were still there, the questions were still there. And so Dr. Sherman is, on this particular day, he's throwing out questions, and classmates in the room, people around me, were quick to answer them. And on this particular day, at this particular moment, I was uncharacteristically quiet. Normally, you might expect this from me. I'm excited to talk in a discussion like that. And in class, I was anxious to participate in those kinds of discussions. But this day, I was silent because I felt like I would be attacked for my more traditional, less progressive viewpoint. And so I just said nothing. You know what the problem with sitting on the front row is? I mean, I learned better there. That's why I sat there. But the downside of sitting in the front is that you can't hide. The shrinking into your chair and trying to slide under the table only makes you more conspicuous in the front row. So I just kept my head down and stared at the table and tried not to make eye contact. And if I breathe real slow, maybe I can be invisible, I thought. It didn't work. So I'm not looking, and I hear Dr. Sherman say, "Brian," he had a very slow, sort of the southern drawl. It masked his brilliance, and he really was brilliant. "Brian, what do you think?" And there was this long pause, and I started calculating. I was carefully wordsmithing in my mind what was going to come out of my mouth. And so finally I spoke, and I said, "Dr. Sherman, I'm afraid that if I tell you what I think, my colleagues here will throw me out of the window." "I'll do my best to prevent that," he said, which did not make me feel really all that great. "I'll do my best to prevent that, but I want you to tell us what you think, and I want you to make a biblically grounded case for why you see these issues the way that you do." And so I took a deep breath, and for the next 5 minutes or so, I laid out my theological position and undergirded it with what I saw as the biblical foundation for it, and then I stopped talking. And Dr. Sherman sat in silence for a long time. It probably was just a few seconds. It felt like an eternity to me. And then he stood up from his chair, and he looked at every other student in the class, and he said, "I think Brian's right." Now, I don't remember what happened next. I do remember they didn't throw me out the window. That part I got. But from that point forward, I was even more of an outcast. I was certainly in the minority, and I didn't mind that, but I did mind the lack of respect for the way that I saw things. Now, fast forward nearly 3 decades to a seminar I was in earlier this year, and I was at this well-respected, very large church, much larger than PCC, and I was there because I wanted to hear their church leadership talk about how they were navigating the rapidly changing world around us, including some of the same issues that Dr. Sherman wanted us to talk about so long ago. The person leading this seminar was one of the pastors of the church, and he began his introduction to this session like this. He said, "I know that all of you, because you're followers of Jesus, are trying to figure out how to navigate this political shift to the left in our country. And because we all believe the Bible, I know that you don't know what to do about the more liberal sexual ethic that is becoming mainstream." And he continued with statements like that, assuming that a couple hundred people in the room, because we were all in ministry, were all cut from the same cloth, that we voted the same way, that we held the same beliefs about social issues and lifestyle issues and so. And I sat in that room remembering what it felt like that day in Dr. Sherman's class. And this time it was even more strange, oddly, because though I theologically related to the more predominant mainstream position in the room, I couldn't help but be uncomfortable wondering about the other voices that might be there. Would somebody be brave enough to speak up? Or would they, like me, just try to hide in their silence and hope nobody noticed? Finally, one person stood and interrupted the speaker and said, "You are making assumptions about the people in this room that are just not accurate." And she said, "I am a follower of Jesus. I do believe in the Bible and subscribe and adhere to the teachings as I understand them, but I don't see these issues the same way that you do." And then another person spoke in affirmation of the first person, and they said something similar. Now, there weren't many of them, but it was enough to confirm that there was not uniformity of thought and perspective on the Bible in the crowd, in that crowd that day, or in this crowd this day. Our church is filled with people who are pursuing Jesus, albeit different places on the spiritual journey. Some people trying to figure out who Jesus really is, and some people would say that you've been following Jesus for a long, long time. But even so, we don't all interpret the Bible or see the world the same way. Our world has become very diverse in the way that it understands right and wrong and morality and immorality. And for the follower of Jesus, this is super difficult because we have to sort out not what feels good to me or what is solely compassionate towards other people, but we are obligated to try to figure out how we think God sees the world. And then we have to live and act and teach accordingly, whether that feels good to us or not. So you and I might land in different places, but if we are both followers of Jesus, we must start in the same place. It's incumbent on Christ followers to actually follow him to the best of our ability. And that means that we have to look closely at how Jesus related, not just to people who thought like he did, but to people who thought and operated differently than he did, which is where we will get our understanding for how to do that ourselves. One of the central descriptors of Jesus comes from the opening of John's account. John is one of the four gospel writers. We call these gospels. They are the narratives of people who lived and breathed when Jesus did, and they give us the story and the account of the history of what happened when Jesus was here. So part of John's opening goes like this. He says, the Word, that's a capital W, I'll come back to that in a second. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. So you'll notice this is verse 14 of chapter 1. So this is part of what we call the prologue to John, which is the way that John begins his account of the story of Jesus. And in case you don't know, spoiler alert, John doesn't care about Christmas. He doesn't care at all. He gives us no narrative of the Christmas story, no birth, no manger, no Mary and Joseph, all that stuff. He doesn't care about that part of the story. John wants us to go all the way back to the beginning. He refers to Jesus as the Word with a capital W. That means the Logos is the word he uses, the Logos, which is to say the cosmic one who spoke the whole world into existence with his very word. He starts out chapter 1, verse 1, not at the Christmas story, but in the beginning. Just like this, he says, in the beginning was the Word, And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. See, John wants us to know that Jesus, though he was born as a human in a specific place, in a specific time, exists beyond time, before time, and is in his very essence God himself. And this is critical because once you get that part, then there's this critical central descriptor of who Jesus is that we often miss. Let me show it to you again. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. Full of grace and truth. The glory of God is visible in the attributes of Jesus that are grace and truth in that order. And except for Jesus' treatment of the Pharisees who were trying to manipulate people for their own gain and trying to maliciously abuse people and murder Jesus himself, except for them, Jesus always approached people, especially people who thought and lived differently, or people who thought and lived in a sinful way. He always approached them with grace first and then truth. So grace, we would you know what truth is. And I think that God is super frustrated with our talk about my truth and your truth. From God's perspective, there's only one way that he sees it. Now, I might not interpret it right, but whatever it is that God sees, that's truth, period. And then on the grace side, grace is, in church life, we would say the unmerited favor of God. But what we really mean by that is God loves you no matter what. He accepts you. He wants you like you are, and then loves you enough not to leave you like you are. But inside, this is the way we would put it today. We're going to put it in a very short phrase. Grace is believing the best. I believe the best about you. So grace and truth. Grace without truth is harmful permissiveness. It's the attitude that says, whatever you want to do is good. But that's not true. I want to do lots of things that are not good. And so that's hurtful if we have that attitude towards people. Followers of Jesus do not have the option of extending grace without truth. But truth without grace, well, that's just harsh legalism. It's nothing but empty rules. The church stood there for a long time, and a bunch of people got hurt in the process and are still hurting today because of it. We can't pick one or the other. Jesus did both, grace and truth. And we don't have time to look at the many examples of this. Let me just encourage you to do this on your own. If you're interested, you could look at John chapter 4, where Jesus goes out of his way to encounter this Samaritan woman at the well. He exhibits to her, he grants her grace and tells the truth. In John chapter 8, there's a woman caught in adultery. She's literally drug in front of Jesus and an audience waiting to stone her to death. And Jesus gives her grace and truth. Or in John chapter 3, a man named Nicodemus, who's a Pharisee, he comes to see Jesus at night under the cover of darkness so that nobody knows about it, so he won't be spotted. Jesus treats him with grace and truth. In these and dozens of examples, they're not hard to find in the Gospels, Jesus always tells the truth, and the truth always follows grace. You cannot have one without the other and follow Jesus. So I can stand firm in my core convictions about right and wrong and how I interpret the Bible, but to do that without grace means to operate unlike Jesus, like I'm not following Jesus. And if I'm operating not like Jesus, then I might be right on the issue, but just as guilty in the sin. Are you with me? If I am not operating like Jesus, I might be right on the issue, but just as guilty in the sin, because truth without grace is sin. So I want to get really practical with you, and as we talk about today and over the next couple of weeks, how do I stand firm? How do I have an unshakable faith, but do it the way that Jesus did? So today I want to give you 3 specific ways that we can do that we can stand firm, hold to what we believe in an unshakable way, and still reflect well on who Jesus is. The world will be a better place if we will learn to do this. So first, pick your battles. Not every hill is a hill to die on. When Christians fight with the whole world over every single issue, we come across as just being against everything. Jesus himself knew how to pick his battles. And he gave us an example about this. There are several of them. Let me just give you one. Later, they are the group of people trying to take Jesus down. They're trying to find a way to get rid of him. They sent some of the Pharisees and Herodians to Jesus to catch him in his words. It was a trap. So they came to him and they said, "Teacher, we know that you're a man of integrity. You aren't swayed by others because you pay no attention to who they are, but you teach the way of God in accordance with truth." A little buttering up never hurts here. So, is it right to pay the imperial tax to Caesar or not? Should we pay or shouldn't we? But Jesus knew their hypocrisy. "Why are you trying to trap me?" he asked. "Bring me a denarius and let me look at it." And so they brought the coin, and Jesus asked them, "Whose image is this? And whose inscription?" "Caesar's," they replied. Then Jesus said to them, "Give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and give to God what is God's." And they were amazed at him. When I read the Bible, I try to take my time to understand what's happening, but also to learn from what's not happening. Let me show you. When I think about how Jesus could have responded and still been right, he could have quoted Psalm 24:1. Psalm 24:1 says, "The earth is the Lord's and everything in it." It all belongs to God. He could have quoted Psalm 50, where God uses this word picture. He says, the animals of the forest are all mine, and the cattle on 1,000 hills. Again, it's a picture that says it all belongs to God. So Jesus could have made a sound, solid, biblically accurate theological case that all of the money belongs to God, not the emperor. You don't have to pay your tax. God owns it all. But Jesus knew this was a side issue. Jesus knew this was a distraction from the thing that was more important. So he famously said, "Well, why don't you just give to Caesar what's Caesar's and give to God what is God's?" He's saying, this is not worth fighting over. And I just refuse to engage here. Do we do that? Do we pick our battles? If we want to have any influence over the world around us, we have got to stop setting our hair on fire every time we disagree with everything. So, follower of Jesus, take a deep breath. God is still on the throne. Jesus wins. At the end of it all, Jesus still wins. So could we just chill? I think about the words of the Apostle Paul, who said this: "I have learned the secret to being content." Can we just say this for a minute? Content is the weight is off your shoulder. It's the deep breath. Content. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all of that. I can be content because of him who gives me strength, through him who gives me strength. So check this out now. The secret to being content for Paul, you can almost hear it. Like, I'm not anxious. I'm not jacked up. I'm not amped up. I'm not bent out of shape. The secret to being like that was not the world conforming to Paul's perspective. The secret to contentment for Paul was not civil laws that lined up with his theology. The secret for being content for Paul was not politicians all being followers of Jesus. The secret to contentment in a world that you see as operating in a different way than Jesus wants us to operate, in a world where everyone seems to be determined to eat each other alive, the secret to being content with all that chaos around me is living in the power of Jesus within me and to reflect well on him in spite of all that out there. The way we do that, at least one of the ways, is we pick our battles. We have to decide what makes the cut here. It shouldn't be everything makes the cut. The second thing is seek first to understand. Seek first to understand. You know what is at the core of our problem? I'm convinced of this. Everyone is talking and no one is listening. Everyone is talking and no one is listening. And it's so easy to do. Particularly social media, it's designed for talking. It's designed for a one-sided monologue instead of a two-sided dialogue. And even when we think we're in a dialogue, when two people are talking to each other, most of the time they're talking at each other instead of listening to each other. I am convinced this is the epidemic of our day. It's at the core of our problem. If we could really work, if we could learn to try to understand, we would find compassion. And our hearts would break at someone else's pain. And our theological positions of right and wrong, they don't have to change, but we would be imprinted with humanity's reality. James, the brother of Jesus, famously said, "My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry." Quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. I've taught on this, I think, I didn't count it up, but I would wager to say I've taught on this text right here more than any other text in the entire Bible. Because number one, it's just that important, and number two, we're still not doing it. Listening is vulnerability of yourself. The listener becomes vulnerable. It's not just nodding your head or saying an occasional while you formulate your rebuttal. That's an argument. That's not listening. Listening is watching. We say we listen with our eyes as much as we do our ears. I'm looking for the nonverbal cues and the facial expressions, and I'm trying to affirm your feelings so that I can, if only for the briefest of moments, walk in your shoes. Feel what you feel. Understand where you're coming from. And here's the thing. Listen, none of that is agreement. None of that is agreement. I think we don't do this. I think we don't listen to each other because we're afraid that if I understood how you feel, it might change my core conviction. And I'll tell you, that does occasionally happen. But for me, way more often, it simply highlights, when I'm listening to someone, particularly someone who sees the world in a different way, it highlights the complexity of the thing that I tried to make simple. Because it's easy to stand at a distance when something is theoretical and tell someone this is what I would do until it's you. We had this family who was here, part of our church, for a long, long time. They were staunchly conservative about all the social things, whatever that comes to mind, that probably fits them. And they were vocally conservative about their viewpoints. And then their adult daughter decided to transition from female to male. And I sat with them while they sobbed in their pain. They were wrestling with this core belief that they had held for a long time, that they still felt strongly about. And they had to hold it alongside their child, who they were convinced was going to end her life because of her gender dysphoria. I didn't change my core belief, but by sitting with them, by listening, by feeling their pain, by crying with them, I did grow to understand anew that it is super easy to talk about right and wrong until it's personal, until it's your child that you think you're going to lose. Jesus was always compassionate. He always connected with people. He always cared about their pain, full of grace and truth. And grace reaches its fullness through the rich connection of seeking first to understand. See, the reason that we're at war with each other is because we've allowed culture to influence our behavior instead of allowing our behavior to influence culture, which is what Jesus always had in mind for his church. That's kind of heavy. Could we back up for just a second? And let me just say one more critical thing about this. You cannot really listen to someone. The thing that I've been talking about, you can't really feel what they feel and listen with your eyes and all that. You can't do that by email and text. We decided we'd try to illustrate this maybe a little bit for you. See if you can relate to it. Check this out.
Amanda. Hey, girl. Want to grab coffee? Hey girl, wanna grab coffee? Sure. I'm at work right now though. Maybe 3?
Sure. I'm at work right now though. Maybe 3. Sure. There's not even an exclamation point. Wow, all right, I guess my friendship is optional. She says 3, I'm busy too. I have things going on. Actually, that doesn't work for me. How about
4? That's actually even better for me. Okay, thumbs up.
a thumbs up? A thumbs up. All right, she's annoyed. Oh, period. Cool, period.
So we're going out for coffee, so like cool beans. Haven't heard that in a while.
Cool beans? Nobody said cool beans since like the 1900s. Ridiculous, that's sarcasm. She's saying I'm old. If you don't want to go, just say so. Upside down smiley.
Oh, that emoji is cool. Okay. I'm really confused.
Triple emoji combo. She is gaslighting me. Gaslighting queen. Fine. Forget it.
Forget it? Forget coffee? What?
Wait, the fake confusion. She knows. She knows. Everyone knows the thumbs up is code for attitude.
No, I meant yes, like 4 is perfect. Like, that works for me.
That's not what it meant at all. Passive aggressive. You are unbelievable.
Aw, she thinks I'm unbelievable. You're unbelievable.
There's so many exclamation points. She needs to lower the bass in her voice. You have been passive aggressive all morning. You know what? Change of plans. Something has come up. No thanks.
Oh man, I was looking forward to that.
And now to Facebook to unfriend this woman, because I am done.
Nervous laughter. Might be familiar. I had this happen just the other day. A real true story. I texted one of the pastors on our staff on Monday, and because I had heard something, I said, hey, I just want to let you know, maybe you haven't heard that so-and-so died. And they responded and said, yeah, I know they died on Friday. And my response was, thanks for letting me know. Well, that's what I said. As soon as I sent it, I thought, oh, maybe they would have interpreted that. I didn't mean it sarcastically. Maybe they would have interpreted it as, well, thanks a lot. Today's Monday. You should have let me know Friday. Thanks for letting me know. And so as soon as I thought that thought, I just called. Hey, just need to clear the air. I want to make sure we're still good. No misunderstanding. And they were like, what are you talking about? Of course not. But for me, that's really critical. I can't tell you how many people that I know who argue by text. Really. Or by email. Or worse, people who take jabs at each other on social media. It's insanity. Like, stop. I tell people all the time, like anybody in my circle has heard me say this like a million times, I don't do conflict by email or text. I don't do conflict by email or text. Matter of fact, if you're part of our team, if you're on our staff at our church, that's like a rule. Like, we don't do conflict by email or text. If the temperature elevates, if it starts as something benign like you just saw and then becomes something heated, we stop. I just stop cold. We talk face to face. It's the only way we're going to do conflict. I had this one person many years ago sends me this email complaining about stuff in the church, whatever. If this ever happens with you, by the way, if you ever crank this email, you're going to get the same response. And so this is what I did. I responded like this. I said, hi, Bob. Bob was not his name. Hi, Bob. Maybe you don't know, I don't do conflict this way. but I am glad to meet with you. So when would you like to get together? I did not and will not deal with the content of the conflict, whatever it is he was talking about. I don't ever address it at all in my response. Simply say, I don't do conflict this way, but I would love to get together. When would you like to get together? It's the only way I'm ever going to respond to a text or email or whatever. And so Bob did not respond to me. And so I moved on with my day. Fine. I mean, he can get back to me whenever he wants, whatever. Except sometime later, I got another email from Bob with more complaining. And so I responded again. Hey, Bob, maybe you didn't get the first one. It's okay. It's all good. Hey, I don't do conflict this way, but I would love to get together. When would you like to get together? No response. This goes on for months. I keep getting emails from Bob. And so finally, I sent this email. I said, hi, Bob. I have mentioned this many times now. I do not do conflict by email. In fact, I just want you to know that I'm no longer going to read your emails at all. Your email is going to skip my inbox. I've set it up to be automatically archived. So if you want to talk, here's my number. I'll make time for you anytime. Are you aware of this? Nothing good comes from conflict by text or email. Nothing good. I've never seen it resolve itself well. So just refuse. You can't seek to understand this way. Just refuse. Completely refuse. Just do not engage. You can blame it on me. Pastor Brian says I'm not supposed to do it like this. I don't know if he's right. He might be crazy, but he's what he said. You blame it on me. It's fine. If the temperature rises on an otherwise friendly exchange, if it starts out nice and then kind of gets heated, then you call the old-fashioned way, where there's actually a live voice on the other end. And you say, how can we clear the air? And that's my lesser preferred way. Usually I'd rather just get together. Sometimes we just make a phone call. It's okay. Pick your battles, seek first to understand, and then finally, we've got to be willing to pay the price. When I was in seminary, I paid a price for holding to my convictions. I was a bit of an outcast. Before that day in Dr. Sherman's class, I was even more so after. I was looked at differently, down upon, if I'm honest, by most of the students and not a small number of the faculty and staff. I respected those who thought differently from me, but the favor was not returned. And that's okay. It's a price that I was willing to pay, and I still am. In the last analysis, the world is not going to be friendly for those who hold to the teachings of Jesus. He said it himself, especially when it comes to how we see issues of morality and right and wrong. Jesus was an outcast, and he paid a price for his unshakable stance, even as he was delivering it with grace and truth. And not just Jesus, but his followers too, all of whom were persecuted, and not a small number of whom were martyred by beheading and crucifixion, and some of them were burned alive. So if I, take a little heat and have to suffer a bit for my faith and my beliefs, I'll do that. I'll take that. As long as I can hold my head high, knowing that I have elevated the value of people, even people who don't think like me, especially people who don't think like me. Because I want to be like Jesus, who set the example by picking his battles and listening well and believing the best instead of spewing hatred and anger everywhere he went. People who don't think like me are not evil, and they are not my enemy. They are human beings made equally in the image of God with the same infinite value I have. And it is my responsibility to love them like Jesus did and like he still does. When we design these experiences for you on the weekends, we often look for the right way to reflect on what we've learned together. And as we planned for today, the team found this song that I had never heard and many had never heard before. And it so fits this moment. And so as Beth and Paul sing this for us, I hope you, like me, will take a minute and reflect on these powerful words today.
Have we lost all our hope in each other? Have we forgotten we're sisters and brothers? And can we be a little more like Jesus to one another? And can we give a little grace for heaven's sake? For the sake of all that's good and holy, and drop the hatred that we're holding, and let the perfect blood of Jesus wash it all away. Lay our pride down at the altar and hand it over to the Father until our hearts are changed for heaven's sake. Maybe we could learn to love if we'd stop hiding. And maybe we could learn to trust if we'd stop fighting. If we fall down on our knees, we could finally start to see and that He loves us all the same for heaven's sake. For the sake of all that's good and holy, and drop the hatred that we're holding, and let the perfect blood of Jesus wash it all away. Lay our pride down at the altar and hand it over to the Father until our hearts are changed for heaven's sake. And may we all learn to seek understanding. And may we all learn to give open-handed. And pouring out our very best and letting Jesus do the rest. And so they know His name for heaven's sake. For the sake of all that's good and holy, and drop the hatred that we're holding, and let the perfect blood of Jesus wash it all away. And lay our pride down at the altar and hand it over to the Father until our hearts are changed for heaven's sake.
No matter what the world throws at us, we can have a faith that stands against all the changes and all the turmoil we might face. Jesus wants to give us that, and we want to help walk with you through it, because our faith really is a journey that we're all on together. So if you need anything from our church, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. There's a link in the chat. It will give you my email, get you direct access to me, and I can pray for you. I can answer your questions. I can do really what we're able to do to help you journey and reach that faith that really can stand against whatever may come. We're so grateful that you joined us today. I hope you have a great week. Invite a friend, and we'll see you next time.